Okay, so can everybody see the slides okay? Yeah, great. Fantastic. Okay, so hello, I am Kat. As I've previously mentioned, I have worked in comms across a various number of sectors, including the VCSE. So today, what we're hoping to do and what we will cover is why strategy is important, the steps to start putting that comms strategy together. We'll also give you some takeaway resources that you can take away and look at the end. And like Alice has mentioned, we will take any questions at the end. But if you do have any small questions while we're obviously going through some of the tasks, please do raise your hand and I'll try and help you the best that I can. So why is strategy important? So strategy, communicating strategy will help you deliver your charity's objectives. So it's basically your roadmap so that you're not just going off on a tangent. You know where you want to get to and how you want to get there. Charity Comms put out this statement, which I really liked, and that's that the most successful charities don't just communicate the changes they communicate to make change happen. And I thought that was quite powerful. So just try and bear that in mind when people say, what do we need a strategy for? It's actually communicating to make that change happen. Now, I know from the list that Alice sent me that a few of you do have a comms strategy already, but I do hope that you find this useful because it's always worth going back to your comms strategy and reviewing it over and over again and keep tweaking it because things will change. The word strategy it sounds like such a daunting task, but it really doesn't have to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the SOSTAC model. And basically, this takes you through step by step how to put together a strategy. So first of all, we'll look at the situation. So that's where are you now? Then we'll look at objectives. So that's where do you want to be? We'll kind of finalize what the strategy how we want to get to where we want to be in order to achieve those objectives. The tactics, we'll look at exactly how do we get to where we want to be. So what kind of tools are we using in order to achieve those objectives? Our action plan, so what are the timescales, who's going to do what? And then control, so did we get to where we want to be? So that's all about measurement and evaluation. So starting off with our situation analysis then, what I would like you to have a look at in your workbook is the SWOT analysis. So a SWOT analysis basically looks at what's going on in the external and internal environment that might affect your aims as an organisation. So this could be, starting to plot out what you're really good at, so what your strengths are and what the opportunities are there for your organisation. The weaknesses could be, understandably, access to funding, things like that. What about the finance side of things? What about the operational side? So have you got enough staff? Things like that. And what threats are, as the funding declining, what the impact of political things having on your organisation, things like that. So I used this example of a SWOT analysis from the NCVO website, and I thought it was really, really good example for you to get started. So I'm just going to give you just a minute or so. I would suggest to start filling in the opportunities and maybe the threats, so the outward facing ones first. Sometimes that's the easiest. Or alternatively, if you feel that you can do the internal ones first, then by all means do that. So if you want to just start jotting down, you can use some of the examples on the slide there. And I'll just give you a minute or two now, okay. just a caveat that you will get access to these slides as well. So don't worry about getting everything down now. It might be that you want to come back to this slide and jot some more ideas down later on. Okay, so we'll just wrap that little bit up now, and we'll move on to the next part of our situational analysis. So we've obviously looked at the SWOT, and now we'll have a look at what we call the PESTLE. So basically this is a framework for you to consider the current issues and trends in each of these areas that might affect your organisation. So this can be political, economic, social, technological, legal or environmental. So what I'd like you to do on the next part of the framework, on the PESTLE framework, is just to start jotting down. You can use some of these as examples. Again, this was pulled from the NCVO website. Other wider things that might impact your organisation. And this is really, really important that we're doing this kind of background research in the homework to really look at what might be actually affect your plan going forward, because without doing all of this research, we're kind of putting our heads in the sand. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes just to start jotting down a couple of these that might affect your organisation. So again, it could be, you know, there's lots going on in politics right now that might impact you. It might be, you know, technological advances. Does your audience have access to technology? Things like that. So just take a couple of minutes again, and if you've got any questions, just raise your hand. Okay, so last 30 seconds, not to put anybody under any pressure. Okay, so just moving on from, so we've kind of done our internal and external mapping. So moving on, it's really important to think about what your future calendar looks like. And that might be thinking about any important dates that might come up that might influence your communications activities, or if there are any kind of major deadlines that you're aware of that will need plotting in and might impact your communication strategy. And it's also really important to look at the resources that you've got as well, and be really open and honest and realistic with that. So that might be, what cash, what assets, what staff or volunteer time have you got as well. So what I'd like you to do just now is, again, we'll just take a couple of minutes to have a think about what are those kind of key milestones that you've got coming up in the coming year. Are there kind of funding opportunities that are coming up? Are there particular stakeholder events that you want to take part in, or speaker events or particular community events that you want to be part of in order to raise your profile or raise awareness? So if you just want to have a couple of minutes just thinking about that, and also the resources that you currently have, and you've got to be honest about that in order so that we can put the next steps in place. So I'll just give you another couple of minutes just to think about those key dates and the resources that you currently have in place. Hats off to Andy Freeman for trying to look after a little one while he's doing his strategy. Bless you. My heart goes out to you.
You try to look after me, to be fair. Okay, so last 30 seconds. Okay, so just moving on to the next step of the situational analysis. So you've now had a look at your calendar, what that looks like, what your resources are. Next, I want you to think about the communication channels that you currently have access to. So I've shared this, I don't know what we call it, like a diagram, which basically explains the different types of media that we have access to. So this can be earned media, so that's your mentions, shares, reposts, reviews that could be on social media. Paid media, which can be social media ads, it could be actual advertising, sponsorships, things like that, and also your owned media. So this could be your website, your email, your newsletter, podcasts, live events, or your own social media channels that you have. So what I want you to think about is, what are you doing right now? What's working well and what isn't? A task that you could do after this is to actually start jotting down some of the baseline numbers of your social media channels and your website, so that once you do put the strategy in place, that you can then benchmark after, for example, say 6 months, to see if your strategy is having an impact on your socials and your website traffic.
Have a think about what photos and videos that you have. Do you have them saved centrally? Think about your case studies. So set out what could case studies look like for you. And we will cover this a little bit further on. Think about who you could approach for a case study, be that a written one or a video one. So let's just have another couple of minutes just thinking about what you've got at the moment and what is working well and what's not working well. And it might be that you want to knock what's not working well on the head and just focus on what is working well for you. So I'll just give you a minute or two just to think about what you currently have. And also, if you don't have access to particular communication channels, you know, are there ones that you think that you might like to put in place as well? I appreciate that not everybody might have a website or establish social media channels. So just have a think about where the gaps are as well. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. So we've now done our homework, we've done our background analysis, which is really, really important for us to start putting things in place for going forward. So when we think about our audiences, please don't say everyone. I've worked in comms for a long time and I have had a number of managers that have said we're trying to target everyone, and that is pretty much impossible. So what I would like you to think about is, who are you trying to reach, and what do you want them to kind of do or think or feel? I would like to just think about, you know, maybe choose a top 3. So I know in your workbook, I've put down in your grid beneficiaries, supporters and stakeholders, because I thought broadly they would kind of be your kind of target audiences. You can be a lot more descriptive and a lot more, you can drill down further than that if you like, but they were kind of like broad kind of audiences that I thought would maybe resonate with all of you. So if you just want to take a couple of minutes just to either think about if they are appropriate, if you want to drill down a little bit further, but also think about who can help you reach those target audiences. So, you know, could you work with other partner organisations in order to reach a particular beneficiary? Is there somebody that works at the, I don't know, the West Yorkshire ICS to reach a specific stakeholder that you want to kind of tap into for, you know, to make reform or change? Just have a think about that for a couple of minutes in your workbook. And just on that, you can be as prescriptive as you like, and it probably is easier if you can really drill down if you're looking at women aged between X age and Y age, for example, or try and be as prescriptive as you possibly can. Okay, last 30 seconds, and don't worry if you've not got 3. As long as you've got something or you've got a rough idea of 1 or 2, that's good enough. Okay, so hopefully we've got a rough idea of in terms of who our audiences are. So how often are we going to need to talk to them? So you've got in your workbooks a power and interest grid. Now this is just, it's a good visual to kind of get it really clear in your head in terms of how much effort you need to put into communicating with these particular audiences. Now, as you can see on the grid, I've kind of plotted out the stakeholders, beneficiaries and supporters. So, you know, stakeholders, they may have high power, they may not have lower. I appreciate I've probably put them a little bit too far on the left. But, you know, they might be a little bit more in the keep satisfied, maybe manage closely, depending on what you're wanting to achieve. Obviously, the beneficiaries, the people that you're actually trying to help, you know, they are powerful because they are the people that you're trying to influence and might be able to spread that message further. And they are likely to have an high interest in what you do if you can actually help them satisfy a particular need. I popped supporters in keep informed because, you know, they may have a high interest because they want to help your charity, but they may not have necessarily the power in order to help make big, great leaps, but actually they are interested in what you do and they will be able to help somewhat. So just have a think about the audiences that you've just written about, and how would they sit on your power and interest grid in terms of the effort that you would need in order to communicate with each of those audiences. So I'll just give you a quick minute to do that, because hopefully you've already identified who they are. So if you can just plot them on your grid, it'll give you a clearer vision as to what you want to do to move forward with next. And I've also popped a link just on that slide as well, which you'll be able to have a look at in a little bit more detail if you wanted to afterwards, to read a little bit more about this grid. Okay, so hopefully you've managed to plot them on there and I have a rough idea as to how much input you need to put into these different audiences. So let's move on to the more really, well, I say exciting, the more interesting stuff about your organisation specifically. So firstly, I just want to say a big thank you to Catherine at Bring Me to Life, who I have used as an example throughout the next couple of slides. I do really appreciate that, and I have worked with Catherine before in my previous role at WDHCS, or Prosper as they are now known. So let's have a look at defining what your mission is. So some of you might already have a mission statement, but it's always worth going back and reviewing and having a look at actually, what do you want? What's kind of your shop window? What do you want to say to people? So your mission basically defines your organization's purpose and its objectives and how it will reach its objectives. So for Bring Me to Life, I've kind of tweaked Catherine's mission statement from her website to support and empower women to take control of their health and well-being through preventative interventions to promote positive mental health and self-management. So it doesn't have to be long, it can literally be a sentence, if that, but I just want you to start thinking about what do you want to, what is the purpose of your organisation? So I'll just give you a couple of minutes to start jotting that down. And don't worry if you can't form a sentence right now, just maybe pop some bullets down, and then you can bring all that together a little bit later on. So in terms of, Julie's asked about what sort of language should you use here. Basically, it needs to be active language. So it needs to be very much what you are going to do. So obviously in the Bring Me to Life example, I've put about supporting and empowering people. It's very much about what you're going to do. It's using that kind of active language, not passive. This is what we are going to do. I hope that answers your question, Julie. And we're going to talk a little bit more about tone of voice later on as well. Okay, so hopefully you've managed to get something down. Again, apologies that I'm only giving you a couple of minutes for each of these sections, but I'm conscious that we do only have an hour, and sometimes I've been on full days of training when putting together a comms plan, so I do apologise that we're whizzing through. So moving on, and so what I want you to think about next is the vision. So your vision basically details where you aspire to go. So this is a little bit more, blue sky, maybe a little bit more blue sky thinking, more aspirational. So when I had a look on the Bring Me to Life website, it was very much honed around reducing waiting times. So that's, that's really something impactful to strive towards. So it's, reducing waiting times in local gender targeted primary care mental health services and providing timely care for all Wakefield women in need by empowering women. Can you say that? I've mentioned women a lot of times in there, but empowering women and nurturing their families. So giving them the tools to nurture their families and improve their overall mental health. So this is very much where you want to go. So you've identified what your purpose is. This is very much your vision. This is where you want to go, what the impact that you want to have. And again, it doesn't have to be anything too long. It could just be a sentence. It could be, I don't know, reduce reduce the number of calls about, again, mental health, or to improve the health and well-being of a particular community by a particular date, kind of the really big, bold, blue sky thinking. So I'll just give you, again, another couple of minutes just to think about that. Where do you want to go? What does brilliant look like? And also, by identifying what your vision is, you're really giving yourself something to hang this strategy on. What are you working towards? How will you measure it? How will you know that you've had the impact? This is kind of your stake in the ground as to where you want to go. Okay, so just wrapping that back up. So let's move on to next, what your values as an organisation are. So your values are your guiding principles to support your behaviours and decision making. And this is really, really core, because this will also influence how you communicate with all of your different stakeholders, and also your tone of voice, again, which we'll speak about a little bit later. So some examples on here are empowering, expert, responsive, bold, respectful, loyal, inclusive, collaborative, having accountability, having integrity, being passionate, honesty, sustainability. So these should really be the cornerstones of your organisation. So I just want you to spend just a minute, just maybe jotting down, if you can manage 3, that'd be great, just to really start drilling down what are the 3 kind of cornerstones of your organisation.
Okay. So moving on, so we're now moving towards the objectives. So what are the communications objectives of your organization that you want to take forward into the next year? So with communications objectives, they basically need to be, you've probably heard of SMART before, which is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So they need to be really closely related to your organisation objectives. So these need to really underpin what that kind of the mission and the vision of your organisation is. So this is kind of really starting to drill down in terms of your communication efforts and how they're going to help you achieve your wider aims. So there are a couple of examples on there, which again were kind of based around the Bring Me to Life. So that could be creating and sharing a series of educational videos. So it's really starting to drill down kind of specifically what you're going to do, featuring experts discussing self-management techniques for mental health, aiming to educate women about support services and resources. These videos will be published on our website and social media platforms from July to December. So again, it's specific, it's measurable. So we know that we're putting out 6 educational videos. They're going to be relevant to the audience that we're targeting on the relevant platforms, and it's also time bound. So we've put ourselves a time frame on there. And again, with the second example, so it's about establishing partnerships with healthcare providers and community organisations to enhance women's health and wellbeing. So again, being very specific by hosting 3 workshops with local providers in September 23. So again, it's relevant, it's time bound. These workshops will focus on mental health, self-management and preventative interventions. And we're also going to foster ongoing partnerships to help referral pathways and coordinated support for women. So it's really, really being specific, and it's measurable. So, we'll be able to look at how those partnerships are helping with the referral pathways and how many people have been referred on to specific services and things like that. Are we actually having that impact in terms of reducing the waiting list, for example? So I just want you to I'll give you a little bit longer for this one, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, just to start thinking about what some of your SMART objectives are. I would say you don't need any more than 3 main objectives for your organisation. I'm conscious that a lot of you are smaller organisations and you may not have the time to put into executing a lot of this. So even if you just want to put 1 or 2, it would just be good to to start thinking about where you want to get to, but this is more specific in terms of how you're going to get there. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes again just to start jotting some of those down. And again, these are your objectives are just markers in the road at this point. So if you set out to create a series of 6 educational videos, but actually you only get round to doing 3, that might be something that you review when you next review your communication strategy. It might be something that flags up whether you are resource poor or time poor, and actually that is maybe where you go back to the situational analysis part of your strategy and look at, actually, we don't have the time and the resource to do 6, but instead we'll review it and we'll do 3, for example. So that's why it's really important to make these as smart and as specific as you possibly can. Okay, so hopefully you've managed to make a start on some of those. I'm just going to quickly move on. So we set out our objectives. When we think about our strategy, so we are creating an overall strategy, but what we usually do within a strategy is we include basically a paragraph which explains how, basically just how we're going to get to where we want to be. So how do we get there? And this is obviously informed by your insights and your research that you've done way back at the situation stage when we did the SWOT analysis. So I've obviously used Bring Me to Life again there, and this is just a very, so if this strategy was handed to somebody, they can see very clearly what you want to achieve. So it seeks to empower women to prioritize their mental health and adopt self-management techniques for overall well-being. How are you going to do that? Well, you're going to do that by establishing the organisation as a trusted source of information, promoting active engagement and self-management practices, and building partnerships with healthcare providers. So these are the audiences that you've set out, and and community organisations, and the methods that you're going to use. So you're going to look at targeted campaigns, educational materials, online resources, and different various collaborative events with your organisations. So if you can just summarise in a sentence, if possible, kind of an overarching statement in terms of how you're going to get there. So what this strategy is actually is aiming to achieve, and how you're going to manage it. Doesn't need to be as long as that example. I think I just tried to cram quite a lot in there. It can literally be a sentence. So I'll just give you a minute or two just to jot down some ideas for that. So I am conscious that we're just running slightly behind on time. Is everybody okay if this maybe ran over by about 10 minutes or so? Is that okay? Yeah. Again, I'm trying to give you enough time, but I don't want to rush you, but it's kind of we're just having to move on a little bit, a quicker pace, just so that we can get through everything. Okay. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. So the next bit is about thinking about content planning. So this is about thinking about what the key message for your charity could be. Key messages around the main areas of your work. Start to really think about what your charity's story is. This is really about storytelling and actually bringing those stories to life through case studies. So like I've mentioned before, that could be written, spoken, visual, or video. And also your tone of voice. So we'll cover that in this next section. So what I want you to just start thinking about are what your main messages are. So that's what you do and who it benefits, what your evidence base is. So, obviously you guys are set up. There have got to be stats and facts and figures that back up the reason why you are here and why you are helping the people that you're trying to help. What your approach is, who your supporters and partners are. So we've previously talked about our audiences. Some of those might be the supporters and partners that you are working with. And really want you to start thinking about the 3 main issues that you address. So if you can just spend a minute just going through, basically going through that. Just hang on a second. So obviously I've used Bring Me to Life as an example on there. But if you can just start popping down a couple of bullet points, I'll just give you a minute or two just to start jotting that down.
So these are these are your top line messages in terms of you as an organisation. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll move us on to the next slide. So the next slide basically looks at your kind of service and campaign messages. So thinking about what you've just taken from your top level main key messages, I want you to just start having a think about kind of what the issue is. So when you're thinking about how can you evidence some of the proof points throughout your campaign messages, and how can you kind of bring those to life through personal stories. So on there I've done an example again of Bring Me to Life. So it's about what is the proposition. So this could be what the issue is, why does it matter now, what are we why are we talking, what are we talking about and why are we talking about it, and what do we want our audience to do with it, so it's about kind of having those kind of key issue, those kind of stress points backed up by the proof points, and then thinking about other people beneficiaries who use your service. Or for example, I know that Kat uses her personal story quite a lot in terms of why she set up Bring Me to Life. So just start having a think about that. I won't get you to fill that in your workbook because I am just conscious that we are pressed for time, but it's something that you might want to revisit and come back to in terms of your services and how they actually help people, and the evidence base to back up why, and also who you use to tell that story. So it's not just yourselves saying it, you're actually starting to use other people, whether that be beneficiaries or supporters. So how we say things matters. It really, really does. So when we talk about tone of voice, it's basically based on the brand values, your organizational's values, which we outlined earlier, and they really start to show off your personality of who you are in terms of an organization. So I'll just give you up to a minute to just start thinking about what your tone of voice could be. So, do you want to be friendly? Do you want to be professional? Do you want to be bold? Do you want to be playful? Are your target audience a younger audience? So actually you need to be a little bit more informal.
you know, in order to resonate with them? You know, do you need to be, just more relaxed and informal? So for example, at Wordsmiths, ours is more of an energizer tone of voice. So we like to be clear, spirited and bold. So we're really kind of, you know, we deliver the work, we take it seriously, but actually we like to have fun while we're getting there. So just write yours down. It could just be 3 words, you know, how do you want to come across? What would your tone of voice be based on what your values are? Okay, so moving on. So tactics. So basically, tactics bring together your audience, your objectives, your audiences, the messages that you kind of want to get across, and your communication channels. It brings them all together. So basically, it's how, you know, in order to achieve an objective, you know, which audience should we target, which messages should we highlight, and which channels should we use? So when we're thinking about this, some example tactics could be so case studies, like we've mentioned before, videos or written. These could be partnership events. It could be a press release announcing a service that you're going to be offering. Social media posts. So thinking about where is your audience? Do they use Facebook? Do they use Twitter? Do they use LinkedIn? Do they use TikTok? Do they use Instagram? Think about partnership posting. So if you're doing a collaboration with somebody, with another partner, making sure that you're doing partnership posting and using the same hashtags. This could also be like printed materials or web articles, your e-newsletter, or like a podcast, if that's something that you wanted to do. So when we're thinking about storytelling, use case studies, you know, turn everybody in your organization into a storyteller. And the fact that you are small VCSE organizations, you are closer to those stories. So turn that to your advantage. These are a couple of, I'll probably only play you the one, but these are examples of video case studies that I did when I previously worked at WDHCS. And this was about me going out into the community and actually speaking to different organisations that we were working with.
I'm Chris Barr.
There we go.
I manage Eastmoor Community Project on Eastmoor Estate in Wakefield. We're a community centre offering a variety of community activities. We also have business meetings, we have a venue for business meetings. And all that changed during the pandemic, and we had to decide whether to close completely or reinvent ourselves. And we did, we reinvented ourselves, and one of the many things we did was offer a food bank service, where we would take donations of food in and distribute them to families in need, anybody in need on our estate in the local area. We applied for the grant because...
So rule 101, always make sure that people wear a microphone, otherwise you will hear rustling in the background. The other example that I have here is Kane from St George's Community Centre, who was part of our community interviewer project. By this point, I did have a microphone, which you will see clipped to his lapel, which dimmed the background noise. But this was about, again, interviewing him and getting his opinion of what it was like to be a community interviewer, so that we could demonstrate that to our other stakeholders.
He came to me and said, maybe this training could be beneficial for you. And I thought, it's community interviewing, seeing what the community wants. And with that, I thought it'd be great experience, great opportunity, and I'd be able to help the community, which is what it's all about, really. One of my biggest takeaways from this experience will probably be, as one, learning to talk to the community, learning to talk to people.
So you get the gist. So don't just think about written when we talk about storytelling and case studies. Think about people's voices and getting their voices heard. People connect and resonate with other people that are like them, that speak their language, that you know, are really embedded in those communities. Those are the people that you really need to be nurturing. So in your action plan, in your workbook, there's a little section about audience, channel, message, action to take, and how they can do this. So this is kind of a little bit of a mini action plan. So that's kind of looking back at the audiences that you're trying to target and just starting to try and be a little bit more descriptive in terms of how you're going to you know, what channel are you going to use in order to reach them, in terms of thinking of some of the messages that, you know, you want to get across to them. What kind of message do you want to get across? What action do you want them to take? And how can they do it? So I'll just give you a couple of minutes just to start jotting down a couple of these ideas. But again, this is kind of a starter for 10 template. You may not have 3 sections, you may want more. You may only have a couple. So it's completely up to you. But these are just a couple of examples, again, that were based on Bring Me to Life for some ideas in terms of messages and what I want them to do, and how they can actually find out more information about actually taking an action off the back of the message that I've put out. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes just to start filling that in. And again, maybe it is that you might have to do some a little bit of research around your audiences and actually where they are and what platforms they're using. So obviously, if you're dealing with a more elderly demographic, the chances are they aren't going to be on TikTok. They might be, but the chances are they probably aren't, or they might not be on social at all. So actually you need to start thinking, okay, outside the box, how are you going to reach somebody that maybe isn't digitally minded, doesn't have access to social media? Start thinking about outside the box. Appreciate that's a very digital channel example on there. Okay, so hopefully you managed to get a few bits down on there, or at least some bullet points in terms of your audiences and the kind of channels and messages that you want to get across. So we're moving on to the latter part of the framework. So I'm now looking at action. So this is about having a bit of a reality check. Thinking about, do you have the right communication activities? So these are your outputs, you know, the tactics in order to achieve the objectives that you set right back at the beginning. So it's about basically starting to put your actions down onto a separate planning tool or spreadsheet. So I've actually included a link in there. So when you get the slide, you'll be able to access this. which actually leads you out to a number of different planning tools and spreadsheets that you can download for free. So this basically starts allowing you to have a bit of a adding some accountability in there. So who you want to do at what time, what their task is, how frequently they want to do it. So that could be, so for example, Anne needs to publish the newsletter on a monthly basis, and it needs to cover off X, Y, and Z. Anne also needs to check Twitter at least once a week, and make sure that she's posting at least twice a week on these particular key messages. So it's starting to kind of build out a bigger spreadsheet where you can start adding that accountability in. But again, this is kind of bringing it back to the beginning again. So the action plan, do you have the resources, the time, people, and money to actually pull off the plan that you've put in place? There is no point in pulling together an all bells and whistles communication strategy if you don't have the resource to execute it. So really think about whether it is realistic. And if you don't think it's realistic, go back and review it and scale it down. It doesn't have to be bells and whistles. It just needs to be enough in order for you to achieve your organisation's aims and objectives. And finally, we're kind of moving into the very latter stage. So you've started, pulling your plan together. It's time to start thinking about what those milestones are. So how will you evaluate what you've done? How will you check what's working and what's not? And if something isn't helping you achieve your vision, then stop doing it. It's as simple as, don't try and make something fit if it's not working. If you're communicating to people through Facebook and you're getting absolutely zero traction and nobody is engaging with you, you either need to think about reviewing maybe the messaging, or maybe doing some more like awareness raising, or actually maybe Facebook is just not the right channel for what you want to achieve. Don't do it just because everybody else seems to be doing it. It's got to be specific to your organisation. And just by starting with those measurable smart objectives that we set out at the beginning, you're halfway there already. You're giving yourself markers in the sand in order to be able to start measuring and evaluating. And, for example, how many people turned up to your event? How many people off the back of that followed up for more information? All these kinds of things are examples of ways that you can measure and evaluate your progress. And it's not all just about, oh, we've got another 200 followers. That's great, but actually, are they the right people? It's quality versus quantity, and that's what I'm always, quality every time over quantity. I would rather be speaking to a smaller group of relative, the right people, than a massive group of people that actually are not interested in what I've got to say. This is a very brief overview, and again, we'll send you this as a separate attachment, but I actually have something similar for my organisation that I work with now, where it's kind of just an overall snapshot. So I have my mission at the top. I have kind of the long-term outcome. I have those specific communication objectives, what the activities are that I'm going to do, actually execute to achieve them, and then what measures are in place. So that is just a very quick example of the Bring Me to Life model and the objectives that I kind of set out as my examples. So, it's what the activities are, and then kind of how, what the measures are. So actually, it's not just about your outputs, it's about outcomes as well. So actually, do you manage to get a seat at the West Yorkshire ICB Improving Health Population table? If that's what you want to do, if you want to be an influencer within your sector and make change happen, how do you kind of get a space of those seats, those seats of power, for example? That would be a brilliant outcome if the tactics that you're deploying actually have an impact on healthcare services. Absolutely brilliant. That you're absolutely doing a sterling job, and that means that you're doing the right thing. So they're just some examples there of some measures in relation to the communication activities and objectives. So we're near the end. I am conscious of time. So in summary,
Audit and research, probably the most important part of your strategy. Do the background work. Start with your why for your vision. Why you're there, what is your purpose? Set your SMART objectives and strategy. Agree on your comms tactics to deliver those objectives. Plan those activities and sense check your resources. Create that content delivery plan with the accountability as to who's going to do what and when, and the frequency. And match your messages to your audiences and your comms channels. Tell your stories, by all means, in every which way you possibly can, because people buy into other people. And remember to measure and evaluate those outcomes. We've included a couple of extra resources at the end as well, including the Nova cultural calendar. And there are a couple of Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups that you might want to become part of. There are no stupid questions, as I've found. I use these groups on there. People ask questions all the time and resource share. So there are no silly questions, and people are always happy to help. And there are some further resources on there as well in terms of measurement frameworks, and the NCVO have got quite a lot of resources on there as well. So we've come to the end.